okay with that specific?
For those online, if you could please mute your microphone, either on your phone or on your device, please, until it's your turn in queue, either if you're participating in presentation or by public comment. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else got anything on smart scale and UDA update? All right, let's go to new business, the hockey MOU. Mr. Weekly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you may recall, and Mr. Artali, thank you for being here tonight, sir. Parks and Recreation staff, along with Mr. Artali, have been in several conversations with the Washington Capitals. It's pretty, I don't want to say unique, I'd say neat as a lifelong resident here to really think that a major sports team is having some consideration to have a presence here in Madison County. And it's basically working off the concept of a hockey rink and a mutual agreement with the Washington Capitals. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. As I said, Mr. Artali and Parks and Rec folks have worked on this. The MOU between both parties is not binding unless the site location within Hoover Ridge is developed for the purpose of a hockey rink that meets the criteria as outlined in number 1. I don't mean to be reading this point by point, but particular item number 1 in that MOU, the county shall portion, is if you build 100 by 200 asphalt pad and electrical facilities. And from there, if the county were to do that, again, this is later down the road, item 2 in the county shall portion of the MOU states we would give written notification to the Washington Capitals. From there, that's when they would look to contribute their part, was essentially is providing all the, I want to say infrastructure or construction items in to construct that rink. They are mentioning the advertisement. Obviously, they want their logos and in any, I think it's a minor league or some other business affiliation. They've specified MOU. But anyone outside of that, we would just have to give written consent from the Capitals, which it makes sense. Mr. Artali is here tonight. I'm going to put him on spot. We've had some conversations before. So if you have any specific questions with MOU, I'm happy to try to answer those. Or Mr. Artali, and I believe I saw Mr. Carpenter, our PRA manager, is here tonight as well. But I recommend approval. It's not binding. I think it kind of gives you the next step that if the board would go down this route, this MOU keeps it warm on the table for the Washington Capitals. But I certainly defer those who've had direct conversations with the Capitals.
Does anybody have any specific questions prior to going to Mr. Artelli and Mr. Carpenter?
I only have one, I guess, and that is the MOU that's in our packet is on Madison County Parks and Rec letterhead, and that I assume we would transfer it to the county board letterhead.
That may be applicable.
I think
guess
Chris recommended that.
Yeah, that may be applicable. I mean, it's definitely a memorandum of understanding with the county of Madison. We certainly can do that. It would be a Parks and Rec project, but certainly it's county-owned property. It's a county memorandum between the two parties. So, Mr. Gregg, any thoughts on that, sir? But far as the
county letterhead.
On county letterhead. Okay.
All right. Mr. Carpenter, Chris, Mr. Artelli, what would you like to add to this?
I think Jonathan did a great job laying it out. I realize that while we discussed this Parks and Rec level a lot, we haven't at the board of supervisors level. So I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch of the background. It's an NHL program to provide grant money to develop or refurbish or provide new community rooms. So we're working, of course, with the Washington Capitals. They have done 13 either new rink or rink refurbishment in the Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia area. Have to be within a 75-mile radius of their headquarters, and we just fit into that. They like to work with Parks and Rec department as opposed to an independently run league. Just imagine that provides more security that will be ongoing for a long period of time. They insist that it is a community facility. It cannot be exclusive, and they we do something else without hockey out there, and they're all compensated on that. Our meetings.
Yeah, stay there, Chris. Good luck.
Our meetings, two meetings that we've had, Jerry, Lindsay, myself, with two of the gentlemen from the Caps, went very well. While we were talking to them, they were Googling Madison Hockey League and looking at our website, and Hoover Ridge and looking at that, and also the American Legion Hall where we currently play. So they were getting down into the weeds, and they liked what they saw. They said they would love to partner with us. Well, the first step is the MOU. So we establish what they expect from us and what we can expect from them. That's the springboard to apply for the grant. The grant was dormant through 2020 and 2021, and they're reactivating it for 2022. So our timing is really good. Better to be lucky than good, right? The MOU will allow us to apply for the grants and get that in January, February. As I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, I think they review these around May, and the awards are given around August. And then you have a couple of years, and they said it didn't seem like it'd be a problem if we needed more than that to actually use the money. They don't give us the money. I should clarify that. We provide the site, and when the site is prepared and we give them a notice to proceed, they will order the materials and engage the contractors to do the installation. So they're not even giving us money. They're coming in and doing it turnkey. And that's the dasher boards, the upper containment, which is a plastic coated chain link fence, the players' benches, and a tile surface for playing on. So you can ride bikes on it, you can skateboard on it, you can do adult dodgeball. There's soccer playing off the wall. There's a lot of things that we can do with that. With the creativity that Jerry and Lindsay have, gosh only knows what we'll be doing down the road. So that's a thumbnail sketch of the grant and what we hope to do with it. Of course, hockey has every intention of fundraising like crazy to help with the infrastructure, the pad, the lighting, and all that kind of utilities that has to get in place. Any questions about that?
Question for Chris? Sounds great.
Okay.
I mean, it really, really does. Jerry, you have anything to add?
Sooner than later.
When is it due, Chris?
I would love to get the MOU in tomorrow because our last meeting with them was September 30th, and a lot of time has gone by. And I don't want them to think that we've fallen off the face of the earth or we're not interested. I'll be happy to make contact with them and let them know that we had several layers to go through, some processes to go through to get everybody on board and everybody pulling the wagon in the same direction. But we're very excited to work with them. But I'd like to move it sooner than later.
Mr. Chairman, you do. I realize the wording and the action is yours, sir. There is some attempted language if you so choose.
Oh, yes. All right. Questions, comments, thoughts? What would you all like to do with this?
And I don't know if you like to, Mr. Gregg has looked at this well. If you have any thoughts as well, not before you take action. But
Mr. Gregg?
I know that.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Gregg, you made one of your recommendations was to put a duration of the contract. This memorandum of understanding shall remain in effect between January 2022, January 2026. But does that, you go under the county shall, and like under number 9, promotion of any other NHL club membership team is prohibited, as an example. County shall not install any advertisements on the rink service scoreboards that conflict with the official Washington Capitals sponsors. But if we put your time frame in there, then those requirements would expire, and I'm wondering whether the Capitals would be agreeable to those things expiring. You see what I'm saying?
Sure. Mr. Yao, I think the real issue is what would they be willing to agree to? And these are really points of discussion. I don't anticipate that any of those would be a particular problem. My expectation is that after we commit to this project and we actually break ground, we will probably flesh out some of these details.
So let's include this and see if it flies.
See what their response is. Sure.
Okay. All right, that's fine with me.
Other questions, thoughts? Yes, sir.
I'm not clear on, are we including this additional language that was suggested in the memorandum from Sean in the MOU, or is that in or out at this point?
Is this the determination or sunset provision, if you will? I have not put that up. We've had some dialogue on that. That's certainly the pleasure of the board. I believe I forwarded that over to the board members. What I want to be mindful of is just making sure we're not, these MOUs or any kind of agreements normally have a type of sunset provision in it. But this is drafted, I feel, so much in favor of the county that I think, to Chris's point, Mr. Artelli's point, is that we're engaging. We don't want them to choose another locality. So I asked that question of Sean and why he provided that well-written response, but I'm not sure if that should go in or not.
What do you think, Sean?
It's more of an inquiry. If they're willing to accommodate it, I think we put it in. At the same time, they're offering the county an awful lot for this. Now, of course, the county has a pretty significant expenditure of its own in terms of the site preparation and those things. But again, none of this goes into effect unless the hockey team is going to hold up its end. So if we do not want to engage in what I'm going to call the sunset provisions, I don't see that as the end of the world for the county. At the same time, I think I would ask for it.
And
What about if we give it to the county administrator or Mr. Artelli or Mr. Gregg to ask, but we can go either direction on it pertaining to how the Capitals feel on that
so
comment.
maybe the motion is to authorize the county administrator, county attorney, and Mr. Artelli to finalize the agreement.
Absolutely.
Or finalize the MOU.
Sure.
With the understanding that we're going to work off.
Yes.
Okay. Is that?
With the expectation of signature post motion from us this evening.
I believe that's appropriate.
So moved.
There you go.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank y'all. Moving on, school supplemental. We have a supplemental for $350,000 from the schools. There's a letter that states what it's going for. It was part of the Corona Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. It looks like it's going to the MAD Explorers program, which is a partnership among Madison Parks and Rec and Boys and Girls Clubs in Madison schools that serves weekdays from 3:30 to 5:30, pre-K to 8. Questions, thoughts? What would y'all like to do here?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the supplemental request to schools in the amount of $350,000.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Lexi poll. I feel like we've been talking about this forever. Mr. Weekly, please.
Yes, so many things trying to catch up since my arrival here, which thank you again. I love being here. There was an ongoing, first there was a need identified dealing with mental health, particularly stress related. This isn't your normal type of service. We normally have programs for needs that employees may have under our employee assistance program. So whether you're going through bankruptcy or different issues, they would handle that. First responders, I'm going to say this colorfully, they are frontline and see or hear many things. And certainly I defer to experts. We're going to ask Noah to come up here in a minute. You want to start making your way. That there's a need. And prior to my arrival, the former county administrator had tasked, I believe, Mr. Hillstrom, maybe even Mr. Sheriff, with looking at programs that may be applicable to meet that need. They had identified the product or service provider you see here tonight. We also did some vetting with Thomas Jefferson EMS Council to see what they offered, as well as CSB. Some programs were not far along. Some we feel do not meet the need. It seemed like this service would do so. However, because I'm a believer in calling someone to present a service that they're offering, we do have a Carl, and I hope I don't butcher the name, is it Frazano on the line tonight? Thank you, sir. We have him online tonight. He's got a small presentation. There's also a portion of time that you have Q&A. Before I kick it off, I'd like to give it over to Mr. Hillstrom and maybe talk just a little bit more about the need and how this would help in the EMS community and beyond. Should other departments want to come on, there are components for law enforcement and or fire and so forth. Mr. Hillstrom, the floor is yours before we go to call.
All right. Thank you, sir, and good evening, board. Mental health is it's a very important aspect of what we do, but it's often not thought about or talked about due to the I'm type A, I'm a lifesaver, and I don't have any weaknesses, right? I'm bulletproof. Suicide is becoming, prior to COVID, was the leading cause of first responder suicide. And I've personally been impacted with mental health. I've had friends, family, been in this business a long time. And it's a growing epidemic. It's here. It's real. The reason I'm personally passionate about this program is we need preventative maintenance. It's like going to the gym, trying to ward off the heart attack. We're not taking care of our mental health. The things you see, and you see tragedy, and it stacks. And it's not just the suicide prevention. It's, as the Supervisor Weekly mentioned, or County Administrator, sorry, finances. It's all these things that stack up on you, and then you have that call, and then bad things can happen. People do take their lives, and I think this is a very important benefit for our first responder community, fire, volunteer, career, whoever, all responders, to be able to have a resource to help them. And I can't stress that enough. We've had incidences, I can't go into detail, where I know I've had employees who have been impacted and they're no longer here. So I think Carl will be able to more eloquently present this program. We've researched for many, many, many months different programs, but this one is the winner of the committee. It's a resource. It puts us in touch with professional help that deals with first responders, their specialty. As you all know, we can a little bit of an odd group. That's okay, but we need that expertise. And that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board, or if we want to hear what Carl has to say. It'll be a short presentation. He gave him the lead in on that. So.
What would y'all like to do? Do you have some questions for Noah, or do you want to get right to Carl? All right. All right. Carl, or you? I apologize. I'm not even going to try on the last name. Would you welcome and please proceed?
Absolutely, and thank you, Aoife, and thank you to the board. There's a slight delay here in the presentation, I guess through GoToMeeting. So if you guys are having trouble hearing me, please let me know, and I'll try to speak louder or adjust any of the tech that we have here. I know it's 2021, and sometimes stuff still doesn't work, but I'll try my best. So Chief Hillstrom, thank you for the introduction. You basically nailed, you hit it on the head there. What we present here through Portico, we're a division of Lexipol, if you guys are familiar, kind of a one-stop shop for first responders. We offer grants, policy, grant finder and grant writing, which are separate entities, as well as our e-learning platforms. And what I represent and help spearhead through Lexipol is our division called Portico that focuses on mental health and wellness solutions. Now, I will admit this presentation will be a bit truncated compared to what I normally do, but I just want to kind of hit the top bullet points, because I could talk to you all day about the horrific stats for first responders as a whole when it comes to near misses, line of duty deaths, and firefighter suicides. Now, of course, this is a little bit more firefighter directed as far as this presentation goes. But this applies to first responders and fire and rescue as a whole. So I just want to make sure that I reiterate that. So this is just going to be a bit truncated, focusing more on the application itself. Before I start, I do like to throw out a few stats here and kind of do my little itinerary of how we go about this. I tell you guys a few stats of that since we work with the FBHA, which is the Firefighter Behavioral Health Alliance. Jeff Dills, the director there, he helps us with all our updated stats when it comes to fire and rescue. We split that up between dispatch, EMS, special teams, and so on. So these numbers that I give you and I'm presenting to you today are actually for our industry as a whole, for fire and rescue as a whole. And what those numbers are is from 2014 to 2019, there was about 756 firefighter suicides. And that does not include about 510 line of duty deaths, but that also doesn't include any near misses or incidents that happened that we did not report on, such as folks that are dealing with firefighters or EMTs that are dealing with issues such as PTSD, alcohol and substance abuse, depression, fatigue, marriage issues, and unfortunately, the list goes on. Those are not reported normally, especially when those are people that are unfortunately, they don't become, it could turn into workers' comp claims, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, not to mention backfilling positions when people may have an issue with alcohol or depression and they keep calling in. And now you're having to backfill those positions constantly, and now you're paying two people. So in our industry, unlike say law enforcement, where they have a revenue stream, we don't. So we want to make sure that we're also helping the agency in a budgetary fashion. And of course, there is no price when it comes to the lives of members of our agency. So with that said, I like to put folks here and say, hey, I want you to put yourself into this Cortico logo, because currently what we normally have are 4 major resources, which would be our chaplain support, our CISD team if applicable, our current EAP, and our peer support. Now, as I go through this really quickly, we're going to be filling in those gaps as you saw, and we're creating more of a 360 wellness solution, because over the years we have found out that those 4 resources are just simply not enough. They were good for a bit. As we grow and reach into different situations, especially with COVID, it's caused a lot of unforeseen issues, especially hiring, line of duty deaths, firefighter suicides, near misses, and sometimes, in some cases, people are actually resigning earlier just because of the stressors of COVID, and they just figure it's that time. So the first part of our application, again, this applies to everyone. Everything that I state here, this information is accessible to our families, our retirees, and all members of our agency. So it's not just for EMT, it's not just for our firefighter, it's for everyone within our organization and our agency. The anonymous self-assessments, they're pretty self-explanatory. They cover about 60 plus topics, and they are questionnaires that a member of your agency would take that covers alcohol, depression, stress, well-being, and so on. They would have access to this 24/7. So they don't have to wait to be on shift to get extra help or access EAP or possibly speak to a chief or director or HR. They have all this information and all these avenues to use at their fingertips 24/7, whether on shift or off shift. Now, the second part of this would be our firefighter wellness toolkit. So generally, once you take a questionnaire based on whatever you feel like you may want to address. So say I take a questionnaire on depression. Once I go through the questionnaire, it usually only takes about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the topic. It would give me a score. With that score, it would also give me a next step, if you will, on how to proceed, such as possibly booking some time with a therapist that is specialized in that type of topic or in our profession as a whole. Because unfortunately, a lot of folks that are in our EAP currently, they don't really have a strong focus on our profession. They might do water, wastewater, parks and rec, or just a generalized counseling, which is great, but it also does not help those within our industry fully because of what everyone sees. Law enforcement, fire, EMS, dispatch, they're all separate, but they tend to all work together, especially on very similar scenes. So we treat everyone the same way, no matter what division or who you represent. This is a very, very high risk and a very, very high stress industry. So we want to make sure that we try to cover all those topics and subtopics, but more importantly, we make this 100% confidential. as well as accessible to not just those at our work, but there's another big part of our life that's called our home that we want to take care of. So that's why we have this accessible to our family members, ourselves, and our retirees. There's no limit on that. If someone retired 1 year ago or 10 years ago, they will still have access to this information. The next step would be our firefighter wellness toolkit, which covers those topics as well that I just spoke about 60 plus topics, but also subcategories on them. So it's alcohol abuse, depression, family support. You know, a lot of these that you see here are what we deal with as a whole throughout the industry. Might have a top 5 or so, but it doesn't matter because this is pretty much a one-stop shop for each topic and subtopic. And what I mean by that is that this is where you would get additional literature via articles, hyperlinks, redirected resources such as suicide prevention hotlines. This is 100% customizable, so we can also add any type of local groups that may be around. I know sometimes there are men's groups, first responder groups, any type of social gatherings that one may have that are additional resources. I know I live outside of Atlanta, so we personally have a first responder group in my town that just focuses on those that are first responders. It doesn't have to be just fire or just EMS and so on. Also volunteers and part-timers are welcome. So with this wellness toolkit, it has all that additional information, as well as you have videos, audio cast, podcast. It just kind of gets a little bit more into the weeds on whatever topic that you're looking at. Now, again, this is all private because a lot of people in our industry, especially nowadays, complain about how everything is a little bit more individualized. So we are actually kind of bend ourselves to not complain about it, but to make this accessible and adhere to those new changes. So now people can take this, these wellness toolkit, the questionnaire, any additional information, even where I get to next, when we start booking appointments with our therapist through our EAP and therapist finder, they are going to be able to do this on their own, and they're going to be able to do it without anyone knowing who is actually doing it. Now, you all can access the information on the back end and see how often it's being used, how often a particular topic is being accessed, and so on. But what you will not be able to see is exactly who is using it, because we want to keep that confidential, a big focus, so that everyone feels comfortable enough for using it. And then they can access any other information on their own accord, or if they want to seek additional help by speaking to HR or the chief or a director, or booking some time with a therapist, they can do so without feeling that pressure of unpacking their entire life in their privacy to people when they're not ready. So this is where we go for our additional information. The next step would be here, and I just do a little precursor before this because it's one of the most important parts of this application. It's who you have currently in your EAP. It's our therapist finder. Now I put these stats up here really quickly, and I won't go over every single one of them, but many of them are very self-explanatory. Within our industry, the bell's been rung. The FBHA has talked about it. The FDIC conference talked about it this year. The Firehouse Expo talked about it this year. Mental health and wellness has become a major, major topic, and the COVID-19 pandemic did not help matters whatsoever. And I think that's part of the reason why the bell's been rung a little louder the last year and a half or 2 years, because there's been more instances. Those numbers I told you guys in the beginning, that's actually only 65% of the reported numbers. So in reality, we were looking at closer to 1,200 suicides and about 750 to 800 line of duty deaths. That does not include near misses, and that does not include instances where our brothers and sisters in our industry are dealing with issues such as PTSD or depression or alcohol and substance abuse, where they're kind of at the end of the rope and they just haven't sought out that additional help, because there is a cultural stigma on seeking additional help within our industry. From the FBHAs, where these numbers are coming from, they state that 87% have actually feel there's a cultural stigma against seeking help. So that's why they don't do that. That's why they don't go to their chief or the director or HR or utilize their EAP. 81% fear of being seen as weak or unfit for duty or advancement, which is a huge, huge fulcrum here, because that can go either way. Either people are complacent and just become functional in whatever is bothering them or whatever they're going through, or they tip the other way and they become a near miss or a line of duty death or a suicide. So one of the bigger things here that I'm going to end on, and I'm going to get to our therapist finder, is that 63% have found that the services within their EAP tend to be unhelpful or inadequate. And that's because I've heard several stories from chiefs as well as firefighters and EMT, because we have a lot of, at least in our area, we have a lot of men and women who do both in the ward for central EMS. and then either do volunteer or work for one of our stations here in the area. Again, you're seeing a lot of the same things, but within your EAP, they have found out that it's unhelpful a lot of the times because the therapists are not trained in our particular profession. So with our therapist finder, which is the third part as we're kind of closing on the cycle, it's essentially exactly what this looks like right here. We take your current EAP, and that, you know, I sometimes when I speak to folks, they tend to roll their eyes about their EAP because they also realize it's not as good, or there's just maybe not enough people within their EAP for different choices. So what we do is we help vet those therapists with you, not necessarily for you. When I say that, I mean we create a questionnaire and a form for you, and we ask you what you all want to focus on and what you think is best for your agency as a whole. What is best for your members? So we help put together that questionnaire, and whoever is spearheading this program or initiative, you will be able to focus on those that say specialize in our profession as a whole. Marriage counseling, maybe you want them to be a former firefighter or someone that was also a former first responder. If they have any specializations, maybe on PTSD, because a lot of our brothers and sisters were also military at one point. So we want to make sure that we cover a lot of those branches on the tree. As you see here, it's also going to have one-touch dialing for the therapist. Once we put all that information into this module for you, we also will have an option for non-EAP therapists that we seek out. So obviously, we want to make sure that everyone's in network. You have the information on your copay, any specializations, any notes. Some may have a clause about how they do their teletherapy or how they book their appointments. Because the two main things I want to focus on here when we're helping you vet the therapist is that we are in an industry that has a lot of ego, a lot of pride, and a lot of stress. So with that said, we want to make sure that we give our members options. And those options are, when we're helping you vet these therapists, we want to make sure that they offer a 24 to 48 hour window to book an appointment. Because maybe one of our members, they're at the end of their line and they don't have 5, 7, 10 days to book an appointment. That's just out of reality, that there's no way that can happen. So we want to make sure that we choose people that have a quick turnaround so people can book themselves on their calendar. We can do it through the application as well, because it is HIPAA encrypted. All the information is protected. We'll also give you one-touch map directions. And that second part that I said super important is teletherapy. Whether it's because they don't feel comfortable letting people know that they're walking to an office, or maybe it's a COVID restriction, whatever the case may be, we want to make sure that they have teletherapy as an option. The next portion of this, as we're closing in the circle here, is our Get Help Now option. We tend to call this our last resort option, even though I'm not really fond of saying that, but that's essentially what this is used for. What we do is we help you put about 15 contacts, is where it maxes out at, of your choice. It could be peer support, chaplain support, it could be community outreach programs that you have somewhere else. It could be chaplains or peer support in other stations, in other counties, and other towns. You can cast your net as wide as you want. What happens is if someone feels like they are kind of at the end of their line and they've used all these resources and they just need to speak to someone before doing something that could possibly be fatal, they would hit Get Help Now. All 15 contacts would ring at the same time, simultaneously. Whoever answers, the other 14 will drop off. And because it's through the application, whoever is answering it through the application on their phone, it will keep their identity protected. Now, obviously, if you're a close agency or close station, you might recognize someone, and there's nothing we can do about that. But if they're calling an outside source or a suicide prevention hotline, their identity will be protected. So as we're closing up here, I want to let you know some about the little, what I call the bells and whistles. We also provide yoga for first responders, guided meditations, and sleep sounds within the application. This can all be put under their own separate tabs or additional resources. This is just to kind of have, because times have changed where our stations and the agencies are not as communal sometimes because of the bunk rooms changing, the flipped classrooms for education. People are all on different types of diets, so dinner lunch isn't always the most communal aspect. People are doing a lot of things on their phones or their computers. So this is also a short step to make it a little bit more of a communal use so that you all can judge the usage of this application and build that rapport. Because I know even with like e-learning, when our members have to do e-learning every month or every quarter, they do it a little bit begrudgingly. Let's face it, it's not the greatest thing to do several hours of these trainings all the time. But this will help, and we've had a great feedback on how this will help agencies as a whole, as groups, no matter what shift you're on, even they can do this at home, to do little things like this, such as yoga for first responders or guided meditations in the bunk rooms or sleep sounds for those that have issues sleeping, especially the newer generation that comes in because the schedule isn't exactly made for everyone. So that's generally where I end. I just wanted to show you a quick quote here from our co-founder. If you're familiar with Gordon Graham, he's done the 10 families of risks in the pillars of health. He's one of our spokespeople along with Chief Goldfeder. So this is just a quick blurb from him. And lastly here, he states that predictable can be preventable. Predictable behavior, once we see and get everyone on an awareness level through our assessments and our firefighter wellness toolkit, which will help everyone feel comfortable to access them. We will have all the tools. You all don't have to be psychologists or psychiatrists or doctors to know, especially with these tools at hand. Even your family members, they don't have to be that. They can use these tools to help teach themselves, as well as we provide training and support constantly. Because all this information that you see here is not going to be the same on day one as it is on day 365. Whatever happens within your state, whether it's rules, regulations, or even trends in nutrition, trends in fitness programs, any type of updates when it comes to PTSD, alcoholism, depression, all that information is actually going to change throughout the year. It's not going to be the same old thing from day one as it is at the end of the year. So once we have those tools in place, hopefully we can predict some behavior, whether it's ourselves or our peers, and hopefully we can prevent any instances, because I hate reciting those numbers because the last 3 years they have not gone down. Unfortunately, they've only gone up. So we have chaplain support and CISD team. Now we're going to fill in the assessment in between EAP and peer support, our wellness toolkit. We're going to give that access to family support and provide therapist finder to everyone. And then our Get Help Now. So as you can see, everyone, this now creates that 360 wellness solution, and it gives everyone some other options where they may feel comfortable with, because in our industry, we just simply don't feel comfortable accessing some of these avenues. If you all were to join our family here, as I end, to join the Lexville Portico family, there's usually a 12-week implementation time, but to be totally transparent, I've seen it done in about half that time. It's customizable with your badge, graphics, whatever information you all want to put in there as far as personnel. What that entails is that we have a dedicated customer success team that will take all of your wellness information, personnel information, contact information. Will help you with the process vetting, loading therapist contacts into your platform, creating this digital promotion as you guys see here, your peer support module, any additional resources that you'd like to put in there, your chaplain module, therapist finder, and any additional help. Along with that, we're going to do training, which is going to be ongoing, and support, which is also ongoing. We're going to do a couple of tests before we deploy. And then once we do, the most important part of this puzzle is actually getting this off the ground. So we're going to train peer support as well as leadership and whoever else is on board to help spearhead this initiative and keep it going to where it makes our members of our agency feel safe enough to go to other avenues in case they're having an issue, because I'm sure they're tired of hearing about their brothers and sisters lose their lives just as much as we are. So this is where we will help train everyone to be put on that awareness level so that no one feels like they have to access that last resort. So they don't feel like they don't have anywhere else to go. And that's where I end. And I really, really, truly appreciate your time. And Chief, I appreciate for you for the introduction and for our side conversations.
Thank you, Carl.
All right.
If you guys have any questions, you can ask Chief or myself. I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
All right. But first off, we do have Ms. Hoffman joining us on the virtual platform, so she may have some questions as well.
Okay.
Who has questions for Carl or Noah?
I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
So the subscription to the app is for 1 year. It's unlimited users or up to so many users that's allowed to
Carl, I'm going to
access?
let you answer that one. I know there's a breakdown, right?
There's a breakdown. What we do is the pricing and the access goes on a tier system. So essentially, the more people that are using it, the price per head, so to speak, is going to go down. So we split it between full-time, part-time, and volunteer. And then we do the pricing on that. So that's where the pricing template comes from. But outside of that, your family members, as well as retirees, there's no limitation or additional charge or additional number of that. That's all included. We just base that price on that is on a 12-month subscription. we base it on the sworn in personnel, but it's full-time, part-time, and volunteer. Everyone else is included.
All right. Other questions?
So Carl, this is a one-off opportunity we've got here with the $8,000 discount. I mean, $12,000
No, 8,000.
$8,000 discount.
It's not necessarily one time. I'll be transparent with you guys. We have a program. So Cortico has been around since 2014. And Lexipol has been around for about 20 years. So we acquired Cortico to give them a larger platform about 9 or 10 months ago. With that said, we, as Lexipol, we cover 10,000 agencies across our divisions. When it comes to Cortico, we cover about 400 agencies. So what we're doing to help kind of spearhead this a little bit more, because we're a little bit newer, some agencies have been a little hesitant, especially if there's not too many folks using it in their state, which is totally understandable. So what we're doing is we call it an early adopter program incentive. And what that is we allow the first 5 agencies in every state to have an incentive of a 40% discount. So it's just honestly, if the 5 spots fill up, then we're going back to the original pricing. But it is offered, so it is kind of limited, if you will. I don't like to say that. It sounds like I'm trying to, sell you guys a call or something, but that's not the point. It's just that I try to get, because of your agency, it would be nice to then have you guys as an example to help spearhead it to folks in the surrounding areas. So currently for the state of Virginia, whether it's law enforcement or fire, there is no one that is using Cortico currently. But again, like I said, we work with 400 agencies across the U.S., so we've got them scattered. So it just depends if those 5 spots fill up.
So Carl, this is Jonathan Weekly, County Administrator. So Loudoun County is not using this product.
For Cortico, I don't see anyone in your state using it for law enforcement nor
Not law
Or fire,
enforcement, but a fire and EMS component is my question. Because my understanding that locality was, but if they're not, then that's new information to me and that the board needs to know.
Yeah, so if they used us for policy or e-learning and so on, that would go under their different active client list. But I keep my active Cortico client list in front of me, which shows me law enforcement as well as fire. And from what I see for the state of Virginia, there is no one currently that has Cortico.
Mr. Chairman, I stand corrected.
No, that's fine.
I understand that they were, but
But this quote, this proposal right here is for EMS only. Is that right, Noah? I mean, it's not for firefighters, not for sheriff's department, just EMS.
Correct. We've reached out to our partner agencies, and my understanding is they didn't have current interest. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong.
so not getting, law enforcement has their own service that they're utilizing for this. Fire, it's my understanding, Carl, if there was interest, they can build off this because this is geared towards fire and EMS. Right now, it's geared as presented to EMS. And Carl, forgive me, I had my conversation, I think, with Mr. Motto, I think his name is, who's also part of Lexipol. This has, going back to Supervisor Foster's question, I know we talked about part-time, full-time employees, but there is a number, right? I think when I first learned this product, it was like 100 users at this rate. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I'll pull it up for you right here. So they have it in tiers, and it usually goes in tiers of about 10 to 15. Like 1 to 10, 11 to 5. So for this particular rate, this was for, I believe we had a total, and Chief, please correct me, but I think we had a total of 45
That's correct.
for EMT staff.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah, but this pricing, you're telling me is built around that, or is it built around 100? Because the original,
It's built
that original price up
around
there, that original price up there, when I had a conversation with Mr. Motto, was for 100 users. And that's what we used to talk to some of our sister agencies, such as fire department, just to see if there was a need. I just want clarity on that.
Yeah, so for the numbers, so either way, that incentive is going to be applied. So for the 100 users would be 20,000, but with the 40% incentive, it would be 12,000. Okay. So for this, the other one for the total EMS staff of 45, that would be the 8,000.
All right, so not only the price is deducted 40%, but the number of users is as well.
Yeah, because what we do, and I don't want to confuse anyone, so I apologize if it does. When it's full time, it counts as a 1-to-1 ratio. When someone's part time, we count it as 2-to-1. If it's volunteer, it's 10-to-1. So the numbers do drop depending for volunteers and part time. So
Okay.
so when I was speaking to you guys, or at least when I spoke to Chief last week, for the number for 45, that was for the total number of EMT staff. If you were going to include everyone at that rate of 100, it would still have a discount, and all 100 would be taken care of, as well as their families and retirees. So the numbers are different and the pricing is slightly different, but that 40% incentive applies to either one you guys go with.
Thank you, sir, for explaining. So what you have tonight is an EMS component. However, it can be built upon should other agencies want to join in.
Absolutely. We actually have, so this is Cortico Fire and Rescue. We also have what we call city projects, where we built it out to put fire, EMS, dispatch, and law enforcement. It's a lot more generalized information, and there's a little bit more work that goes into it because we want to make sure that we provide resources for each division. Or we do fire and rescue as a whole, where it could just be, fire, EMS, maybe dispatch jumps in as well. But we also have a separate division for Cortico that is just focused on law enforcement. So it could go either way. You could do two separate ones if that's preferable, or we do a big city up project, which we've done with about a dozen different agencies, to where we encompass everyone: law enforcement, fire and rescue as a whole, which would include fire, EMS, and dispatch.
All right, but what's in front of us is for specifically EMS. It looks to me like we're going down the path of, let's see how it works with EMS on a 1-year basis. It looks like there's metrics that the app can provide to kind of quantify usage. And we go from there. And we would have the potential of adding on in the future as a early engagement opportunity with a discount for potentially other agencies that could go with this.
Absolutely, 100%.
There you go.
So, Mr. Chairman, there's a recommended action there for your consideration. I will say to reemphasize, this would be a reevaluation. We know this is a new service. It's good that there will be some data to review, but the recommendation would be, if you're approving this, it would be evaluated during each budget session. This is a 12-month, so we'll have to take that in consideration for the FY23 budget. For current information, the FY22 budget, there was monies allocated. It's in the county administration line item. So if you look for it, there's a line item there. This monies, I would assume if it's an EMS function, we would probably look to do a line item transfer and put it to the appropriate department. But there is monies that was in the FY22 budget that would cover this.
Other questions, thoughts?
Nothing other than, so Jonathan, this would have an effective date of what, December 1st, say, or effective date of today?
Is it effective today, or is it effective on the day that we can actually use it? Because he did say there was a 12-week implementation process.
So Carl, can you please speak? Did you understand the question there? It's basically, when is day one? If we sign this tomorrow.
So what we generally do is, depending on when the budget cycle is, which I already heard when it is, you all can you can hold your place by saying, signing off on the agreement. So let's just say, for all intents and purposes, in January, you sign off on the agreement to say start in April. Well, we can do some background implementation during that time for you, so it doesn't eat up into your 12 months. So once it's about to launch, once it launches, that's when the 12 months start.
So if going back, if the board were to approve this tonight, and we sign this tomorrow, when is day one for Madison County?
First day of March.
Yeah, day one is going to be whenever you guys say this is when we want to start the process. And the official day of it getting started is going to be when we launch it. So, because realistically, you don't want to be paying for the first 12 weeks and not actually utilizing it. That would
Right.
be counterproductive.
All right.
So,
Sounds like we
So
can make
that's
it
why
up whenever we want.
yeah,
as long
because that,
as
I mean,
it's,
that would kind of go
3
against,
months from
that means you're
whenever
really
we
only paying
sign
for
and
9
say we're
months
gonna
or
do
10 months, whatever the case may be. So you can sign off on it, say tomorrow, and we'll do the subscription for whenever, March or whatever, but we'll get the ball rolling for you, getting all the personnel information, EAP information, the vetting process, and then whenever you guys are ready to launch, that's when we can put the date and when you start it. And that, when it's ready to launch, is the day the 12 months start.
All right. Thank you, Carl.
No, not a problem. I just, if you don't mind me, I'll add one other thing. I did send Chief earlier this evening for you guys to take a look at this. I sent him demo information, so you all can have, he can pass along to whoever needs to see it. I gave you a demo login and a demo password that will be good till the end of the month because it changes every 30 days. And then if you guys need a new login and a new password, I will provide that to you for the entire month of December so you guys can look at it if need be.
All right, thank you, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, your consideration of approval would be for this new service. I guess maybe the proper way is if you want to approve, would be authorizing the county administrator to execute the, I guess we'll call it the service agreement with, are we calling it Carl Cortico or Lexipol?
Cortico is the application.
Thank you. So with Cortico, and then whenever implementation, if you want to put a date.
I would think, and I'm thinking about this too simple, I'm sure. Why don't we just get this ball rolling? We've been talking about this it was in the original county budget for 40K. We've gone from which, thank God we're an early engager. We're down to 12K. It's going to take 3 months to get this thing going. It's going to be the 1st of March, it doesn't line up exactly with our budget calendar, but it does work with our budget season. So we could assess prior to putting it into the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. I think let's get this thing going. Good Lord.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I believe, the price is right and the services are phenomenal. So I move that we approve the service agreement with Cortico for the period of a year in the amount of $12,000 and to have the county administrator finish this and establish a timeline for implementation.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. That was an aye by Ms. Hoffman. Against? Hearing none. There you go.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Carl. All right.
Thank you, guys and gals. I'll remove myself from your meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Either way. All right. Planning Commission considerations. Mr. Gregg, why don't you start with levels of standards for grandfathering? These, I apologize. These are 3 items that have come up with the Planning Commission, and they would like some direction on it. Mr. Gregg gave a great grandfathering speech and presentation at the last workshop. I think he's planning to do it again sometime in January or February of this upcoming year. One of the items was on grandfathering. How does it exactly work, and is there a way to quantify it? Sounds like it's gotten a little bit harder. Mr. Gregg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What the Planning Commission had requested that I do is prepare, for lack of a better term, sort of a set of uniform standards that we can determine whether a particular non-conforming use is somehow grandfathered. Part of the presentation that I gave talked about the fact that people tend to confuse what the terms mean. Since I have been given this assignment, I have reached out to other localities to see how they are handling the somewhat sticky issue of grandfathering. And they have the same problem we have, which is that people don't really understand what the term means. What I think the direction we are likely headed is that we will be with any additional changes either to zoning or uses, that sort of thing. We will start including language that things that were occurring prior to the use would be permitted, under certain circumstances. That doesn't change the fact that we have lots of people who think that their activities are grandfathered, and how do we handle that? In terms of levels of engagement, I think probably the first thing to do is to determine, with staff, what the definition is, and how we are going to try to correct these things. Now, there are some things we could do, some of which I think would be more trouble than they're worth. If we try to go back through and look at every use that has been made and basically revisit our county ordinances, particularly our zoning ordinances, and try to determine which activities were in place prior to those, prior to the enactment of the ordinance, I think that would be very problematic. We would need to have lots of public hearings for that. And I'm not certain that we would get very much benefit from doing that. I think the better way to proceed with this will be for me to try to get a little more clarity, both from the Planning Commission and from the board, in terms of what we are looking for, so that we can come up with a workable solution, so that when we pass new ordinances or when we look at existing uses and things, we determine whether they are properly grandfathered or whether they are non-conforming uses that otherwise meet some of the criteria that are set forth with regard to non-conforming use standards.
All of which would be going forward.
Correct.
It seems like it's something that moving forward, we should be adding it to ordinances and putting some historical context to some extent with those ordinances, so we know when the changes were and how it affects non-conforming uses prior to the engagement of the ordinance. Is that's
a fair statement. And one of the things that we need to remember, and this is where the definitions and the nomenclature becomes a problem, some non-conforming uses, if there was an affirmative government act limited to that particular user, like a building permit, something like that, then in those cases, that's clearly a case where the non-conforming use has met the criteria under Virginia law. The question's a little more difficult when somebody proposes a change and, whenever a change has been made to something, people have been going by the old rules. In other words, you can change the speed limit. Just because you used to drive a road before the speed limit dropped from 55 to 35 doesn't give you the same right. And it's kind of the same analogy. If the landowner, using the metaphor for the motorist, if the landowner had done something that, if he had a taxi license or an ambulance license where it can exceed the speed limit, then it's a different situation. But and that's a laughable example. I wish I had more time to think of one. But the idea being that just a change in the zoning ordinance or the law itself does not give people who are abiding by the old rules the right to ignore the new rules. And that's the concept. Where it becomes difficult in application is when you look at longstanding uses of property that would not necessarily be allowed by the new ordinances. So what I propose is kind of a twofold step. First, moving forward, any changes that we make, we include this grandfathering language. And then with regard to things from the past, if there are things that people bring to our attention, then we consider them on a case-by-case basis.
one of Mr. Gregg's big points when it pertained to grandfathering, and then we'll go into the one that's very specific, is level of investment in what the person had engaged or the business or individual had engaged in prior to the ordinance being changed. And that gives a little bit of leverage and leeway to the business or individual and how we proceed post change in ordinance.
That's a fair statement. And the example I used is if somebody had public events, they got, permits for those types of things, they built a stage or something like that. In other words, the more we have seen that the property owner relied on the affirmative government act, not just the existence of an ordinance, but an affirmative government act, then that landowner's case in terms of whether they are grandfathered is much stronger. And what we would do is we would rely on our planning and zoning director to make those determinations. And on occasions, those would come back before the board.
Really cleaned up your examples in a week. The one that is the next one that comes up, and we know that grandfathering has taken place and is taking place, is this seasonal and brief. And we do have a public hearing. I believe it's on is December 1st. Is that right?
I think the purpose is to establish the public hearing. I don't believe we've advertised for that yet.
Yeah,
Right? So you'll have two items for consideration of public hearing.
Yep.
And that's 5B you're talking
Yep.
about now, and then 5C, which Mr.
All right.
Webb will speak to.
So that would be at the first meeting in January, joint meeting in January. The seasonal and brief, the reason I bring that one up is we all know we've been through multiple renditions of seasonal and brief, from allowing 17 days, I think at one point, 16 or 17 days per month, and now we've cut it down to 15 days, and now we're even going in and amending it again. And the amendments are needed, but that historical changes kind of should be put in there so that when all of us are gone, some of those businesses aren't penalized for what they have been doing and what was permitted by the county at that time as business opportunities in the time of when they invested so much. Moving forward into the levels of standards on grandfathering, is that something that you and Mr. Webb, Mr. Weekly will start trying to craft into changes to ordinances?
Yes, moving forward, absolutely.
Yeah, when we have an ordinance amendment or a new ordinance.
Absolutely.
Well, now, yeah, real quick. So I spoke with a business owner in Madison that started way back when the seasonal and brief was prior to January 5th, 2019, which was in place at the time, was 17 days a month. Okay. And this owner actually told me that she had a correspondence from Betty Grayson saying that this is what it's allowed right now. This is what it's allowed. So that's what I was getting at the other night at the planning commission meeting. So does that correspondence from Betty Grayson at that time constitute a government action which would allow this person to continue to operate grandfathered? As you see,
I understand the question, but the real problem with that example is what is the investment by the person? In other words,
they have made
it goes
investment.
back to, my example
That's a
with
good point.
a motorist. Oh, well, the speed limit here used to be 75, Judge.
In this case, they have invested
They have.
substantially.
The more they've invested, the stronger their argument.
And of course, I mean, the biggest one is Early Mountain out there. I mean, goodness gracious, if we require them to have a special use permit, I'll pay it. Okay.
The other one that's a monster is Cloud Mountain
In Plymouth.
and the tent sales. I mean, that was the original intent on seasonal and brief, was to allow the tent sales without having an undue burden for them to put up and take down tents multiple times a year.
Right.
And I think some of these problems arise from a general misunderstanding of what grandfathering means. And, I was tasked to determine what grandfathering means. And what I have found is it means a lot less than people have assumed it means.
There you go. Let's move forward, make our ordinances cleaner, I guess. We'll go from there. Anybody else got anything on that one? B, remove exclusion for seasonal and brief definition of full-time business. In the proposed ordinance that the Planning Commission has circulated, I think everybody has seen at this point, one of the items that now they have defined is a full-time business. The reason for the definition was it was an exclusion from the requirements of large scale and having events, notification. Removing them from having the exclusion also removes the need for a full-time business definition. We also need to go ahead and try to get a date for public hearing on this. Yeah, you talked about it at length. Where do you want to go here?
Yeah, that's one of those things. Well, actually, Gracie brought it up. So this thing all started with the motorcycle thing up at Grace's, remember? And they are a full-time business. But if we exclude full-time businesses and educational entities and private schools and entities conducting such events pursuant to special use permits, et cetera, who's left? We certainly want, and I talked to Jimmy Graves myself, we certainly want people like Graves Mountain Lodge to go through this application if they have a large event. So I say we ought to remove full-time businesses from the exclusion, and therefore now you don't need a definition of what a full-time business is, because that was a big hang-up. It's like trying to decide what the definition of is.
The assertion and the placement of full-time business in was with good intent by the Planning Commission. The problem that it gets to, and it's so that there's not like an undue burden by those businesses to have to fill out another level of government bureaucracy. And then the comment was made to collect funds from that application as well. One, it's never been trying to make a big burden to business in any way, or a fee has never been assessed to this. This is solely based on public safety and how we can best cater with the services that we have available to large events that people in Madison County should have and should like having. I think getting rid of its name of the game, and let's move on with this. Nathan, you got anything to add?
Yeah. That sounds about right. I mean, I thought the whole thing was a real screw.
Yeah, that's right.
While you're kind of turning through what's you're getting some other regulations here on people. I think the idea was so everybody can have to come to you guys all the time.
Just overthought a little bit, maybe.
So there's
The Planning Commission is a very thorough group.
Yeah.
And good for them, and we appreciate it, I'm sure. I think we're at a point, though, that we should go ahead and get a public hearing set on this.
Mr. Chairman, are we looking at the joint planning commission meeting on January 5th or the first business meeting in January?
Let's do the first joint meeting in January. Let's get the ball rolling strong. The next one is very similar, and I hope that we can do a public hearing on it as well. Is the temporary housing consideration, and April was here. What's April's last name? Clemens, yes. April is here, and she has put together this, and I'm sure with assistance from Ligon and Jamie Welts and everybody under the sun, but she did a great job on temporary housing, and it's basically construction, living in an RV while construction's going on your house, emergencies where your house is jeopardized to a point where it's not inhabitable, living there, and then the third one was a medical. Did we ever get clarity if that's part of state code?
I could, I looked today, I could,
Yeah, I don't know.
and this, we're able
took this from Orange County. I did make a definition of temporary housing, just based on some of the emergencies I looked at. We have about 5 people now that are on construction that are doing it, in the county. I think one of the biggest problems is doing a rental property, is doing an options for people that they have to move in and sold a property and purchase something. One couple of them is bought an RV because it's cheaper than living in a hotel. So, if we just told, look, as long as you're actively working with the neighbors, especially the health department, so we can go out and do it. But I guess it's bringing a different perspective. I mean, it's not the way to do it, but I guess we could have these sort of formal recommendations and at least kind of lift it out real clear. That would probably be accurate events.
I think wasn't the change from Orange County the time period? I think we've gone and dropped it. Yeah, it was originally 24, now it's at 12.
I would recommend 12 months, and then you allow for a waiver, or not a waiver, an extension request. We're in COVID, but I don't think we'll be here forever. I'm an optimist. A meeting material, so just make the request for an extension, but we don't have a provision for it now. So for me to bring comfort at the staffing level, we don't want 5 to become 10. We do realize this is an issue. We're bringing it to you. It could help folks out, but first you need to define, do you want to do this? If you do, this is a way to allow it so we can properly administer it. One way or the other. If you don't want it, we need to enforce. If you do want to allow it, we've got a provision. Small source of revenue, but it's primarily to try to help people out. There is a lack of rental property, and
there are people. I mean, I can think of one. Our house burned down, and those people are living in an RV right now. It's a bad situation to be in. We can cater to them in some way where it's not detrimental to Madison County. Cardi, go ahead. I know you're going to say something. Go ahead, man. Come on.
So the only thing I saw, Ligon, I was looking under accessory use, whether that already fits the bill for here. If you would, I just looked it up in our ordinances. Yeah. Oh well, I'll have to go.
Serves you right.
I've got it right here. Hang on. All right. Accessory use or building, a subordinate use or building customarily incidental to and located upon the same lot occupied by the main use or building.
I don't think that was
Okay.
I was going to say,
That's fine.
Mr. Yao, the problem with that is a mobile home or a motor home is not a building.
It says a subordinate use or building.
That makes it a slightly stronger argument.
right. But
So anyhow,
one's going to have a thing through B&B, the other one's going to have something from HUD.
yeah, okay. I just thought I'd throw that out, But yeah, I like this. I mean, I was at the planning commission workshop, and April presented, and the planning commission commented, and I think everybody's on the same page that this is a really good idea for us to have a public hearing on and consider.
We've had this as a development committee item, in which we did have this information exchanged with Emily Bourdon with the health department, so she's well aware. We think this could fit. Again, it's up to your decision. If I'm tracking what I'm seeing up here, you want to add this,
Y'all want to
As
go to
the
public
public
hearing on
hearing.
this?
Yes.
we'll just put it to the same date as you did with the item
Yeah.
before, so.
Yeah, ma'am. We're expecting you to be here, Captain.
Jim and Dustin, get ready for a long meeting.
January 5th, about December 1st, that will preview, it's going to be on 39.
Gonna be exciting.
Maybe 2 a.m. again.
No, it's not.
No.
2 a.m. We'll see you
We'll have
two
some
here.
conversation. of what-
Other items that are coming up.
Yeah, we'll have conversation. We'll try to balance the load out.
That's the way to
I wasn't on the board, but I don't want to have no two of them.
We just want to listen to Sean Gray that long.
Portia.
Let's go to public hearing, first joint meeting in January. Ligon, you'll ask the planning commission if they're gung ho on the same time frame.
Yeah, I think they're all the time.
We need to be considerate of the planning commission. All right. Anything else on those? Challenge to the Batty application. Tracy, welcome.
Get Sean's mic.
Okay. So essentially, there were challenges to Firefly's Batty application. And it was Comcast, Chantel, and CenturyLink. So Firefly and CVEC feels they can successfully contest Chantel and Comcast. So that just leaves CenturyLink. So I went straight to Dr. Holmes at DHCD, and the bottom line is they just had to get an MOU done. Nobody has to sign it. And so essentially, if the contract is awarded, at that time, RDOF awardees must enter into the MOU prior to the execution of the VATI contract. So those negotiations and execution usually take between 3 to 6 months after the announcement of the VATI awards, which would be hopefully in a couple of weeks. So there's time for the VATI applicant and the RDOF awardee to discuss and execute the MOU. And so what Firefly will do will reduce their amount for that project, which will probably end up going back to CenturyLink.
So it's very, thank you, Tracy. So it was odd that, some things we fall in the Rappahannock, Rapidan planning district. Some we fall in Thomas Jefferson planning district. I got this email from David Blunt, who it's a name you remember for the cigarette tax, but they're part of the planning district. And what is this MOU? What does this mean? So that's what led to, and thank Tracy for following up on that we don't need to sign anything because I'm not authorized to sign anything until I bring it to you. But for me, it's basic. It needs to be the same. I don't care which company do it, as long as their upload, download speeds, whatever that criteria is the same. They're meeting the 3-year timeline, which I'm a little worried about now. So if they're taking additional months, they need to meet 2024, in my opinion. And it's no more monies than you designated through your ARPA. So if it's Firefly minus X for whatever company, you need to honor that. We always like less, right? But that's kind of what I'm tracking. So we'll see how this shakes out. But that's the criteria I plan on holding their feet to. But I imagine there's additional conversations. It doesn't look like you can certainly call in a provider if you want to, whether it's CenturyLink or whatever. But it doesn't look like it's at our court fully yet, or your court, fully yet. There seems like there needs to be some strategizing or conversations between those who are challenging the Firefly VATI grant and what that MOU would look like. And then it gets flushed through Sean for review to the board. So we're bringing this to you as an information. We'll see where it goes, but I plan on holding their feet to the fire for the criteria that was outlined with the Firefly.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that it guarantees is that they have to do that work now before the end of 2024. So instead of the 6 to 10 years or whatever it was with the RDOF awards. So that was the good news. And then our residential expert in internet, he agreed that with the infrastructure bill coming through, there's going to be more funds and things will probably start moving pretty quickly all the way around on the broadband front.
Who's that?
Oh, our other, resident internet expert. No, Clint.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, all right. Chantel had the Etland side. Where was CenturyLink on the map?
That's more, I think, green coming through the Wolftown area.
Wolftown Hood area. We looked at this years ago. Tell it's special to my heart when we did the broadband committee and all that stuff. And they maintain the satellite office right in Standardsville. No participation through them at this time, but we're here where we're at now with the small section of the county up near Wolftown. Chantel, I think, had the area up near Syria, I believe. So I believe there was more challenges besides CenturyLink. I think Comcast.
That's what's that. Yeah, Comcast. Yeah, and Okay.
So they need to battle it out, but they need
Yeah.
to get it together soon, so we're meeting that 2024 timeline.
And I was also asked by other residents to get in touch with Chantel, and I checked with Mark Ponton with REC, and he hasn't spoken to them. Everybody, I think, is just trying to hurry to get the Valley Grant stuff done. They're not responding to phone calls.
Let's hope we get internet soon.
And then if I may, since I'm here, December 3rd is our parade. December 4th is our Mary Madison Day. We've got 22 businesses participating, over $2,000 grand prize, and we're pushing it in Northern Virginia in the Washingtonian magazine, obviously locally, but it'll be a full page ad in the paper as well tomorrow. Some really cool prizes. So just go to madisonva.com. Check it out.
Shamelessly plug away.
Gotta do it.
That's the way to be.
Thank you.
That is it. Take advantage of the microphone. Nathan, are you involved with this, the parade and everything? You're not doing this one? Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. Everybody good on that one, on the VATI application? Let's go to the RSA mediation participation. There was a phone call yesterday. I think we have far more to talk about in closed session. Not that much, honestly. In closed session, we do need to appoint individuals to the mediation process, which will happen in Richmond. The recommendation at this point is to appoint Sean Gregg to represent us and Jonathan Weekly. And go from there. It did sound like yesterday that both Orange, who is sending Mr. Frame, who is he chair in Orange? And then Bill Martin are going.
Chair of RSA.
No, he's chair of both. He's chair of both. Yeah, but he will be serving as chair of Orange, is what it looks like down there. I was talking to Mr. Gregg earlier. I don't think that it adds a whole lot to the position. This seems like the mediation is going to be a lot of fun. Everybody sits in different rooms, and they kind of bounce back and forth. Do you see any reason why any of us need to be down at that? Anybody want to go? You want to? You cannot.
Well,
there's a problem.
There's an issue
Yeah.
with me.
Hardy can't go because he serves on RSA.
Which room would I go to also? Yeah, would I go to the RSA room or would I go to the Madison room
Cafeteria
or the bathroom? I don't know.
That seemed to be the high point yesterday, the cafeteria talk.
Where are we gonna have lunch?
Yeah. I think we need to appoint Sean Gregg and Jonathan Weekly. They'll do a great job representing us in every way. How do y'all want to?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All right, motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. Ms. Hoffman, you vote aye or nay?
Is she unmuted?
I voted aye, Clay.
She's aye. Ms. Hoffman's aye. Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. You have anything to add to that one, Ms. Hoffman? Sorry.
Question?
About the mediation participation. All right, we'll get you on the closed session, Ms. Hoffman.
Okay.
We've already done hockey MOU. Any other new business we need to go through this evening?
We have some information, sir, if
Please.
that's
Yeah.
where you're at.
Absolutely.
So, and Alan's got a placeholder, so I'll let him go in a minute. Upcoming meeting schedule. So your meeting schedule for the rest of the year, you have your joint meeting on December 1st. And this is just following your meeting schedule you adopt each year at your organizational meeting. Your following business meeting would be 12/14. And then the fourth Tuesday of the month is 12/28. So we'd like to outline that you have those dates. If there's any discussion at board level, whether you need to cancel any, you want to continue, now's the time to have that discussion so staff can take proper action of notifications.
Ms. Foster's asked if we cancel the 28th. You've got conflict.
12/1 would not be a good cancellation because we have a public hearing, but
Yeah, no,
the other
probably
two
should keep
meetings.
that one. what do y'all want to do on the 28th? Is there any pressing business that we need
No,
to?
no, sir.
Y'all good on skipping the 28th?
We'll just, for full context, Michelle and I'll have a conversation about if there's any invoices we need to bring ahead to the 14th so we can pay our bills. But other than that, nothing on the 28th.
What about if we bring this back up here in 2 weeks and make sure there's nothing looming on the home front? When we have our joint meeting on December 1st, we can finalize whether or not we cancel that meeting or not.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, sir, and it's, Mr. Gregg may have some comments. You could possibly go up to the 14th and cancel the 28th if you like. But that's your, and I don't know plans and what you need to do. That's just your prerogative. So we're tracking whatever you like to do.
So the 14th will be the last meeting. Yes, ma'am.
Well, then we'll keep the 28th on there, so.
So we're coming back at,
Take care of that.
yeah. So we're coming back for consideration on the 1st, your joint
Come
meeting?
back on the 1st. See,
Okay.
make sure everything's straight, and then we'll
Okay.
give everybody enough time to know and go from there. Does that work? Good? All right.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barry has some updates as well.
Mr. Wakely, just to let the board know, we do have some committee vacancies now. I'm just gonna go down the list for when y'all want to set like a time to advertise for them. For the Planning Commission, we have Mike Moscow and Nan Coppich. And Board of Zoning, we have E.J. Ayler Jr. And the last one we have is Mesha Jones for the Rappahannock Rapidan Community Services Board. So whenever the board wants to give us direction on when do we want to advertise for these positions.
Yeah, and with the CSB, because I sit on that as well. So someone will have to, one of the board members will have to take that as well.
We got a lot of that.
CSB is organizational. We need to planning. We need to advertise. I think. Why will we not go ahead and advertise?
So those you have, two rolling off. One is not listed for the other one is the resignation that are effective
January 30th.
So we'll need two vacancies. And yes, I would agree advertising that now, because candidates getting interest may not be easy. And I would say having that in play for consideration. We may in January when we interview whoever comes forward.
EJ Ayler up at BZA, is he timed out or not? No, but is he term limited out? Can't serve anyone.
I do not know. And I've got his information. I'll reach out to Brooks. I've just got to contact him
Well,
and see if he's eligible, would he still wish to serve?
Let's see. Let's go down that path. What?
But we need to advertise for the CSB. too,
What?
because we've done that seat.
All right.
Because Message, she has a conflict.
Taylor. Trying to figure out about EJ. That's resourceful. I think we need to go ahead and advertise immediately for planning and the Rappahannock Rapidan Community Service Board. That is a harder position to fill. Hopefully, Misha Jones and Amber, you really rally the troops and find us some people to do it, and everybody else, when you get some people.
Yeah,
on
and
that
maybe
one.
we pull someone like we did with Valerie Ward, pulling someone from, one of our departments. That makes sense.
And
Because
there's
we did
high-
talk
there's
about
other
this year.
departments. I've got a person in mind, my name here tonight, there's other departments that I know the CSB department's dear to their heart. So
Yeah,
we can definitely reach out to that.
That would be
That's an excellent idea.
Are we good on advertising for the two?
Yeah.
All right. Is she not responded from Etlin yet? It's hard. It's hard. I know.
Internet's down.
EJ, let's wait. See what he says. Yeah, internet's down. I shouldn't tell. Anything else?
That's all I'm tracking for information. Thank you.
Anybody else have any other information and correspondence? Back to public comment. Public comment. Still nothing, Nathan. No. Public.
Julie's here.
Yes, Mr. Jewett, good to see you. All right, I don't see any. You got any on here, Livingston?
Judge, you can.
What's Mr. Buchanan say?
We appreciate the work Chase is doing regarding broadband access. Things are a little delayed up here on the ridge.
It's your broken speech. Right?
Going in a funny direction now, folks. All right. Good job, Tracy. Mr. Buchanan appreciates it. Public comments over. We do need to go in closed session. Mr. Jewett, Mr. Dawson, please, if you feel inclined, please stick around. That's where we're at.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board convene in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Sections 2.2-3711A1 for personnel and 2.2-3711A7 for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ms. Hoffman? Ms. Hoffman says aye. We're in closed session. We'll call Ms. Hoffman up here in a moment. Thank you. Yeah, get you out of this. Yep. Thank y'all for coming.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
You said you could stick around for a copy.
Did you eat supper already?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Being late?
Yeah. You have time. Oh,
No, that's fine. Whenever.
Sure.
5 o'clock.
I guess you told her.